My name is Constable Doug Winkleman. I'm a retired member of the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, and I'm going to talk today about murder and mystery along the Klondike Gold Trail. Oh, I had a hat when I came in, I hung it on the rack. And I'll have a hat when I go out, or I'll break somebody's back. I'm a decent man, I am, and I don't want to shout. But I had a hat when I came in, and I'll have a hat when I go out. Well, we're going to start off here. Thank you. So, contrary to what a lot may believe, the Klondike Gold Rush was not without its share of violence, trouble, murder, mysteries, outlaws, robbers, swindlers, and of course, the ladies. We can't forget the ladies. The ladies, the women, the gambling, and everything else that went along. On most of the occasions, the law turned a blind eye. Let it proceed, let it happen, let it occur. And we'll go through some of the stories here, some of the tragedies that occurred, and the reasons what led up to this. So these four young boys here from left to right are called the Thenantucket Brothers. The Thenantucket Brothers were a set of Aboriginal people that didn't know white people. And in their tradition, if a person died or was murdered, then either the other tribes either paid for the murder or the death, or a person was taken and murdered from that tribe in retribution. So, what ended up happening is, and apparently, some powder was stolen from some miners, believed to be flour. Bread was baked in the camp with this flour, and two people succumbed to it, finding out later that the powder was actually arsenic. So these four boys blamed the white man for that. So while they're out, they happen to come along two white men that were traveling to the gold fields. The white men made friends with them, fed them for a few days while they built their boat to continue up the river. And as the white man left, they began to shoot at them, shooting one of them and killing him, shooting the second one and wounding him, and he was able to fall into the water and float and make it to safety, eventually getting the word out who had shot him. He survived. This is a sketch of the four Thenantucket brothers imprisoned in Tagish Post back in 1898. Gold Rush brothels. Well, who was in the Red Onion Saloon in Skagway? Nice.
Hi, welcome to the Red Onion. My name is Madam Annie Whichway. The Red Onion was built in 1897 and we opened for business as a saloon and brothel in 1898. Now 1898 was the height of the Klondike Gold Rush. In that year, on any given day, the streets of our city were teeming with over 15,000 men, and there were 300 working girls vying for their affections in this town. 15,000 versus 300 meant business was really good. Job well done. Thanks for coming up to visit. We can't wait to see you again.
Had their share, Skagway, Juneau, they all had them. These were some of the soil doves out of Dawson City. Here's some soil doves and what they called their cribs. So what a crib is, and I don't know if you walked around in Skagway at all, but they still have some. Down one of the side streets way down towards the end, away from the ships on the main street, to the south, or to the right-hand side, they still have some cribs that you could look through the windows and see. The cribs are the small little buildings, you can see them. They look like almost like little chicken coops. All that's in those, a bed, a washpan, not much else. That's what they lived in, that's what they worked out of, and that's how they entertained them, the gentlemen of the area. Now, a lot of the bars and saloons obviously had them. So they would be walking around plying drinks and selling drinks and dancing with the men and just imbibing them, of course. Hopefully getting them to go upstairs with them. Now here's an interesting story about Ella D. Wilson. This was in Skagway. Ella D. Wilson was a prostitute who was murdered on May 28, 1898, at the age of 28 years old. So the story goes that nobody had seen her for a couple of days, and so they went and checked her crib. They found her tied up, gagged, and bound, and dead on her bed. A lot of her jewelry was gone, and over $2,000 in cash was gone. Does anybody ever hear of a person named Jefferson Smith? How about Soapy Smith? Okay, so Soapy Smith was a notorious outlaw that had plied many states throughout the southern part of the country and up through Canada, plying his trade with his gang of marauders all over. And he was what you might call a confidence man. He would fool people. So how he got his name Soapy Smith is he's down in the States and he sets up and he had bars of soap. And he'd take the bar of soap and he would stand there with this huge crowd and he'd take a $10 bill and he'd wrap it and then he'd wrap it up with brown paper and tie it. But then he'd slip it underneath and pull out another one. That's for sale. And then he'd put a $100 bill in one and dollar bills in others. But every time switching them out. And then he'd have some of his members out in the crowd, and all of a sudden somebody would open up one and have a $100 bill and, ooh, I just want $100. And he'd sell out 100 bars in no time. Nobody won anything. He'd gather up, they'd move off to another time. He'd sell another 100 bars of soap, move off. Well, the law was after him. And one day they caught up to him. And when they arrested him, and they'd taken him in and they're booking him into cells, the officer could not remember his name, so he just wrote Soapy Smith. After that, even Soapy Smith liked it, so he stuck with that name. So when you were in the Red Onion Saloon and you walked in the front door of the Red Onion Saloon, and you saw that side door on the back side, right across the street was Soapy Smith's bar. Why I'm bringing up Soapy Smith is because at the time that Ella was murdered, Soapy Smith ran Skagway. Nobody encountered him, nobody challenged him, even though that they had city council. The real city hall was his parlor, was his gang of many, many men. He was the law and order in Skagway. And when things happened, including this case, they'd go across and the Northwest Mounted Police would come in because there was no law. Such in this case, the Northwest Mounted Police came in and assisted in the investigation, but never proceeded with doing any of the findings or arresting anyone. But they did believe that Soapy Smith was responsible for her murder because she was not paying up her debt. She was not contributing, as per all the other ladies, to his, if you want to call it, protection. So Soapy Smith is a fellow there, king of the frontier. He controlled Skagway for a long time. You could be rich. There's a fellow that went through the gold rush in the Caribou Mountains in British Columbia that followed the gold rush of 1849 in California. The next very big gold rush was in the Caribou Mountains in the Barkerville area. And I'll give you an example of how much gold was there. In 1860s, Billy Barker dug a shaft down. When he broke through the clay layer, which is like granite, at about 50 feet, now dug a hole by hand, and he broke through, he hit the gravel layer underneath the glacial deposit. He was pulling out, on average, 110 to 120 pounds of gold every hour by hand. He was filthy rich. He celebrated and he partied and he fed and watered everybody. The town was named after him and it's still named after him today, and it's a national and provincial historic site. And he was elated and he bled out his small claim area of gold. He was rich. And he died penniless in a men's home in Victoria, but not a cent to his name. So you can have all the wealth you want, and it can be gone in a flash. You can have no money and be the happiest person in life. So it's how you are, I guess. So, but back in those days, the odds were not willing for you. And as far as how long the gold rush lasted, 1898 to about 1901, it really petered out. Men returned. There was not much. They were picking most of the gold off the top. When that ran out, they just couldn't